This lecture is on tone in writing and literature. It accompanies the handout on tone in writing and literature. Tone refers to a writer's attitude toward a topic, whatever they're writing about. Tone is based on the author's emotion and a feeling that comes across in their writing. Broadly, tone can be described as positive, negative, or neutral. Just like in language review, where we have the three options. You don't have 2, you don't have 100, you have 3. We broadly, and on our most broad way of looking at this, we consider a piece of writing, either fiction or nonfiction, or a word, all the way down to the word level, as being positive, negative, or neutral. As native English speakers, we should be able to assess any one particular word or any one particular piece of writing or a section of writing, like a paragraph, as being either positive, negative, or neutral. Speaking of paragraphs, within the course of a story, if it's fiction, tone can shift. It can change. It can start positive or neutral, become negative, end positive. It can start positive, become negative, then go to neutral, then end positive. Any combination that you can imagine, tone can shift throughout a story. In informative writing, shifts in tone are far less frequent. You don't see it a lot. Usually an author will stick to either a positive or a negative or a neutral tone throughout a piece of informative writing. And you'll learn why that's the case as we go along. Although broadly, tone can be described in any piece of writing as positive, negative, or neutral, we can be more specific with the type of positive, negative, or neutral. For example, a positive tone could be more specifically described as joyful or reflective, like in a positive way, like you're reflecting on your past and it's seen as a positive experience, or hopeful if it's something in the future that you're looking forward to or have a positive outlook on. Negative could be further described as anger or resentment or regret, like we had an earlier Bell work assignment in semester 1 asking you about something that you regret. We also had you write about the funniest moment that ever happened to you. So that would have been a positive one, a positive tone probably, if you were achieving your purpose and expressing your most joyful or happy moment, then it would have a positive tone. And when you were talking about regret, probably had a negative tone. If you were, again, expressing and following your purpose and expressing a regretful experience, it would probably have a negative tone. Could be condescending, could be any number of human emotions that you can think of. The video we watched in class showed this spectrum of emojis that go from anything from optimistic to pessimistic all the way to sadness, fear, nostalgia. And I think I like this image because I think you can associate tone with emojis. Think of tone as being emojis. Words, paragraphs, stories overall, fiction or nonfiction, or text if it's nonfiction. You could literally have an emoji stamp or put an emoji on. Maybe I'll have an assignment or something where I have you guys do that in class, where I just have you, hey, associate an emoji with this paragraph or this word or this story overall or this article. It's the emoji relationship to tone. Tone's basically emojis. Tone conveys how an author feels about a topic or subject. Tone is all about conveying that feeling to the audience to influence how they feel. And tone achieves the author's purpose or the writer's purpose by influencing the message that readers receive. So think of it this way. So how the author feels about a topic or subject. Okay, so if they're writing, unless they're writing to themselves, then I imagine that they're trying to communicate that to an audience. So what's the point of having emotions or feelings about a topic and writing about it if you're not going to communicate that or convey that feeling to an audience in a way that they can understand and that can guide them toward having that same feeling? In other words, if it's all just about you as a writer having certain feelings and emotions, then you might as well just stick to your diary or your journal and just write to your heart's content. The whole idea of tone is you're taking those feelings and you're trying to convey them or communicate them to an audience and to eventually or ultimately influence them to have the same feelings. That's why you express yourself. That's a strategy you use in persuasion and also in entertainment. You want them to laugh along with you as you write some funny story, and also in informing. You want them to maybe stay serious or formal or objective. And again, tone achieves the author's purpose by influencing the message that the readers receive. Think of tone as being, think of writing as being a car that you're driving. So you as the author or the writer are driving the car, and the story or the text is, or the actual writing is the car. So you can control wherever that car goes. You can control where that writing goes. And you can control what everybody pays attention to and how they feel about the scenery that they see along the way. And ultimately, like every communication has an outcome as its end goal. Every communication has a goal of a certain outcome. As I told you guys in class, every bit of writing has some sort of purpose or outcome that it's driving toward. We use that metaphor, driving toward. And that's basically what I mean by this metaphor, and saying you're driving a car and you can influence your audience is riding along with you. You're taking them for a ride, and you're trying to get them to a destination where they either understand something if it's informative, or agree with something if it's persuasive, or laugh at something if it's entertaining, or just understand your perspective if it's expressive. Your goal is to get them there. Again, it's about topic, audience, purpose. Think about how these are always interconnected. The video talks about how tone is developed through word choice, sentence structure, and images. In this class, we'll focus mostly on word choice. You will learn about sentence structures and how they affect tone, but I won't actually ever ask you to produce them. But we will be doing a lot of work with word choice, and you will be altering word choice to alter tone. Images are also a big part of what we'll be doing with tone. You've already shown your ability to do this, or in a couple of instances, your inability to do this with the slideshows. And in fact, going back to my analogy about the car, a lot of you guys with your slideshows, I told you your purpose was to inform about survival in the wild. And a lot of you guys use images that were humorous and I think kind of distracted from your purpose. So your tone in those images that was conveyed to the audience had them off purpose, had them off track. It's like running off the road. It's like running off the cliff in some instances. So if your ultimate goal, your outcome that you were looking for, your purpose was to communicate how to survive in the wild, a couple of the teams failed at this with their slideshows because they were too funny or silly, or they had the wrong tone. Most of you succeeded magnificently. Think about connotation. We do connotation work in language review. Think about how certain words have strong connotations, and those connotations can be negative or positive or neutral. Now, when you use words with negative connotations in connection to certain ideas, then it all gets mixed in together. For example, if you're talking about gun control, you're talking about a certain political candidate, or the idea of teenagers driving not being able to drive at not getting driver's license at 16, but having to wait till they're older. All of those subjects, or using cell phones, any of that stuff. If your tone when you're talking about that, if the words you're using have a negative connotation, then all of those ideas, all of those topics will be mixed together, and they'll come across as producing a negative feeling in your audience. So again, tone impacts, we'll learn later in the video mentioned tone impacts mood, and we'll see how that works. But think about negative connotation words mixing with ideas and having them sort of taint or mix together in a way that ultimately produces negative thoughts about those ideas, negative thoughts about teens driving because you focus on negative words, that type of thing. Teenagers shouldn't be on the road, that type of idea. Positive connotation, same thing. You could talk about cell phones, you could talk about social media, anything. And if you use positive connotations, then you're going to drive your audience to having positive associations with those ideas and positive synonyms for positive words like serenity and calmness and warmth. But also look at just how colorful adjectives like colorful, golden sunlight, or a strong verb like streamed, filled the cabin, didn't invade the cabin, didn't cover the cabin, filled the cabin. Almost makes it seems like filling up a glass full of full of a refreshing beverage or something. It streamed through the window. It didn't pour through the window. It didn't blast through the window. It streamed in. A nice stream. It's like a creek or running water that you just put your foot in on a hot summer day to cool off. Again, all of this is giving forth the connotation of peace and hopefulness. Consider, by contrast, the negative tone that is created through this sentence. The cold, unrelenting wind howled through the cracks, chilling the cabin with an eerie sense of foreboding. Yeah, you got strong nouns like foreboding, and then you have words like eerie, but you also have strong verbs like howled, and even cracks. Not openings, but cracks. Cracks are a negative connotation. You could have just as easily said openings or holes. No, cracks is stronger as far as a noun. Chilling, unrelenting wind as an adverb. Think about how, as an adjective. Think about how you use colorful adjectives like unrelenting and how that impacts tone. Go back to your list, or maybe I'll repost it, where you look at your strong verbs, colorful adjectives, and descriptive adverbs, and think about how the strong connotations associated with those words clearly create a certain tone. Unrelenting wind howled, that's a strong verb. You could have just said blew through the cracks or came through the cracks. No, that's not good enough. We're trying to create a negative tone here, so we say howled through the cracks, a strong verb, howled. Again, cracks, noun, strong noun, negative connotation. Contrast this with a neutral tone. The wind entered through the open window, cooling the cabin with a steady breeze. Okay, very observational, very factual, very neutral. You won't ever have to, and we'll be doing a lot of work with word choice. You guys will be really good at altering word choice to alter tone. We won't be doing much with sentence structure, but just be aware. You'll learn how to recognize this, and eventually, if you guys want to produce this on your own, I'm gonna encourage you to go for it. And we'll be doing a little bit of this in persuasive writing, but for now, just be aware of this, sort of passively aware of it. Later on, you'll use it more actively. And you can look at these examples. I'm not going to go over them here, but the way you punctuate a sentence, the rhythm the words have, the length of sentences. Remember, we learned complex and compound sentences and fanboys and all that, so you could vary your sentence length to make it more engaging for descriptive writing, like your personal narrative. We don't write like that in informative writing. We have a much more neutral tone, and sometimes a negative tone if you want to show how serious you are about a topic. And again, I told you this before, and I'll remind you if I didn't, or I'll tell you if I didn't. In persuasive writing, we'll have sentences like this one in the middle where it's like short, choppy sentences to get your reader's attention to how serious you are. Short, abrupt sentences have a negative tone and, as a result, create tension and also create seriousness. So if you're trying to persuade somebody and you want to tell them how serious a topic is and get their attention, use this type of writing strategy. But again, we'll get to that later. The final thing, it's probably the most obvious one, is imagery. The video talks about the differences of like an animal nature scene of animals frolicking in the wilderness versus cars honking, loudly in some major city at a standstill. Think about these sentences. Take a look at these. Pause the video. Take a look at these, and you can see the difference. We have a positive tone where it's basically describing, a setting in a way that creates an image in your mind, much like descriptive writing that's positive, whereas the negative one is focused on all the negative aspects of the scene. Slump flowers, again, slumped is a strong verb. Lifeless is, in that case, is an adjective, colorful adjective. Rotting bread, colorful adjective. And then you have the neutral tone. The bread sat on the counter and the flowers rested in the vase, the bright colors fading slowly with time. A little bit positive, maybe a little bit bent toward the positive, but probably a little bit more neutral there compared to those other, at least the top one. Think about our short story, To Build a Fire. Think about these images that you'll see, or if you were to Google the story, any images associated with it, you'd see images like this. Think about how bleak that third image left to right on the top looks, and how small the person and insignificant the person is against that frozen landscape. And it's white. There's you can't even see anything in the distance, and the the river may be a potential source of life is actually frozen. Think about that. Look at the far image top right where the guy, literally you can feel him shivering in that image. And both he and the dog are looking in opposite directions. Very subtle, but think about that. It's almost like there's a little bit of hopelessness there. Like, hey, I'm looking in this direction, you're looking in that direction. Where should we go? And that bottom image on the far right bottom, the dog and the man are separated by nothing. It looks like they're just kind of almost like they've given up. Little girls rise on the men, the image, you could argue, I'll ask you this in class, but you could argue that this is a neutral image or possibly even positive. It shows the girls together, turned inward toward each other, as if they're having a conversation. They're not exactly hand in hand, but they're pretty close, one slightly ahead of the other. The house is, notice how the difference in the image here with the man and the dog, it shows them being very small with the environment. Here it shows the girls being very large with the house in the distance and a path that both leads them to a common place. Positive connotation, I would argue. The giving tree, it does say giving tree on there, but you don't even have to have that name on there to know that someone is receiving something. They have their hands in the classic receiving position, looking upward. The tree, the leaves, the branch almost looks like a hand that's gently tossing a ripe, red, juicy apple down, one might imagine, to the innocent, pure-looking boy that's awaiting. Again, this is all positive connotation. Just looking at this image has created an expectation in the reader and is already influencing them to think of the story in a certain way, the tree in a certain way, and the boy in a certain way. Think about this article on the dark side of social media. I could remove this title. I could remove all those words, just show you that image, and you're already thinking this is going to be something negative because the image conveys a negative connotation. It shows the girl. She's hunched over. She's got bags in her eyes. She's got a concerned look on her face. It looks like she's depressed. The background is very dimly lit. Practically, there's that lamp in the background, but practically the only light is coming from her cell phone. It's almost like a scene from a horror movie. Contrasted with this, vibrant, joyful, gleeful, positive. Both subjects looking upward into their phone, making a selfie that will presumably be shared with maybe thousands of followers that get an instant like. The background is very colorful, again, vibrant. This is a lively scene. This is a depressing scene. They're with a bunch of people. She's alone. Tone, conveyed through image. Again, tone refers to an author's attitude about what is being written. A writer's attitude goes a long way in helping achieve their purpose and communicating to a specific audience. Tone is important to a writer's success in achieving their purpose because, at the end of the day, every act of communication has a desired outcome, and tone plays a major role in shaping that outcome.